I never thought I'd outsmart my own children with a smartphone. But after decades of being invisible in my own home, I realized one viral post could make them feel what it's like to be ignored, unappreciated, and humiliated. The words lingered in my mind as I stared at my dusty kitchen counter, the smartphone my niece had gifted me, sitting like a tiny alien device in my palm. For years, it had collected dust, ignored like I had been. I'm Gloria Martinez. I raised Isabella and Javier almost entirely alone after their father passed when they were toddlers. My life became a balancing act, working long hours at a diner, nights cleaning offices, and somehow making sure the house ran smoothly and the kids never went without. I celebrated every achievement silently, paid for tuition, bought birthday presents, cooked countless meals, wiped tears, and offered advice, often unasked, always needed. But as the years went by, I realized something painful. My children didn't see me. Not really. Birthdays passed with ignored calls. Holidays were inconvenient. Invitations to family gatherings felt like obligations rather than opportunities. Even their social media posts, luxurious vacations, weekend outings, lavish dinners, reminded me how invisible I had become. It wasn't just neglect, it was selfishness. And selfishness, I realized, deserved a little exposure. It started with small irritations, Isabella refusing to answer calls, Javier ignoring texts, asking for help with appointments, both casually forgetting birthdays. I tried reasoning, pleading, even joking about how invisible I felt. Nothing worked. Then last week, it hit me. They weren't ignoring me because they were busy. They were ignoring me because I was invisible to them. And if they couldn't see me, the world could. I stared at the smartphone and smiled. It was time to turn the tables. If I couldn't get through to them quietly, I'd do it publicly, in a way they and everyone else would never forget. The stage was set, and little did Isabella and Javier know. Grandma was about to go viral. The next morning, I dug out the smartphone from the drawer, wiped off the dust, and stared at it like it was a puzzle I'd been avoiding for years. My niece had called it easy to use. Easy for her, maybe, but for me, it might as well have been a spaceship console. But I didn't need perfection. I needed control. I created my accounts, Instagram and TikTok, under the name @Sassy Abuela, a harmless persona on the surface, sharing tamale recipes, salsa tips, and old family photos. But underneath, it was my weapon. I began collecting evidence. Every small act of neglect, selfishness, and entitlement became material. Isabella canceling Thanksgiving to go out with friends. Javier bragging about a new car he bought without helping me pay for repairs I needed. Ignoring my texts, calls, or invitations for months. I saved screenshots, videos, and even old voicemail snippets. Every memory became ammunition. I remember thinking, they think they've gotten away with it for years, but they haven't. Every post I was about to create would be small at first, almost subtle. But each one would land a hit, planting seeds of embarrassment and guilt. I practiced narrating in my own voice, mixing humor with truth, because people love to laugh, but they crave authenticity. I posted my first subtle story, a video of Javier sulking because I asked him to drive me to the doctor while I baked him a cake he loved. I added a caption, "When your mother is still your chauffeur, chef, and unpaid therapist, but you'd rather be busy." Selfish kids. Grandma knows. I waited, and in the first few hours, likes began trickling in, comments appeared. "Grandma, you're too funny." "Tell 'em how it is, Gloria." classic grandma clapback. Even strangers were laughing, at Javier, not me, and I couldn't help smiling. That night, I watched my kids' social media. They were oblivious, but soon they would notice. Soon, their carefully curated image of perfect children would begin to crumble, and I had barely started. The real fun is just beginning. Later that evening, Javier called me. His voice was panicked. "Mom, what did you post?" I answered calmly, letting the suspense hang in the air. "Oh, just some memories from over the years. Funny how things look online, isn't it?" He stuttered, muttered something about deleting it, and hung up. The damage was done. Meanwhile, the comments kept rolling in. People were tagging friends, sharing stories of their own selfish kids. Some even shared links to local news outlets covering the viral grandma story. I sat back, sipping my coffee, letting the tension build. This wasn't just a prank. It was public accountability. Javier's face flashed in my mind, shocked, red, humiliated. And Isabella, she hadn't seen anything yet. Little did they know, the first strike was just a taste. The real viral storm was still to come. After Javier's post went viral, I could feel the tension in the house like a storm about to break. But my daughter, Isabella, was still blissfully unaware. That was about to change. I brewed a cup of coffee, scrolling through the evidence I had collected. Her ignored calls, canceled visits, and the countless times she pretended life was too busy to spend 5 minutes with her own mother. She's next, I thought, a sly smile creeping across my face. I created a TikTok video reenacting her engagement week, where she ignored me entirely while I quietly bought her a wedding gift and sent her congratulatory messages. I added my own narration, lightly sarcastic, sharp but humorous. She's busy planning a wedding. I'm busy planning my own therapy after being ignored for months. Grandma exposes. The video showed her frantic calls to friends while I stood outside the flower shop, patiently waiting. It wasn't mean, it was truth wrapped in humor. Within hours, the post exploded. Comments flooded in. "OMG, this is savage." "Isabella, your mom deserves a medal for patience." Even strangers began tagging her, asking if she really ignored her own mother during such a milestone. The humiliation had begun. Isabella called me, voice trembling with panic and anger. "Mom, delete this now. People are talking. This is insane," I replied calmly, almost teasing. "Oh, I'm just sharing memories, mija." Funny how the world sees what you refuse to see yourself. She sputtered, tried to argue, tried to guilt-trip me. I simply nodded, letting her realize she had no control over the truth anymore. And in that moment, I realized something delicious. The first wave of embarrassment was just the beginning. Javier panicked yesterday, Isabella today. Tomorrow, the world would see everything, and my children would finally understand what it's like to be invisible. By the next morning, I had a plan that would leave no room for doubt. The first strikes had worked. Javier panicked. Isabella panicked. But individually, their embarrassment could be shrugged off. What they hadn't realized was that I wasn't finished. I decided it was time to compile a full montage of both their selfishness, a tapestry of all the ways they had ignored, dismissed, or taken me for granted over the years. I gathered the juiciest material. Isabella canceling a Mother's Day brunch for something more important. Javier rolling his eyes while I carried groceries up 3 flights of stairs. Both ignoring my calls for weeks, only to post selfies online showing how busy and successful they were. I combined these clips with narration in my own voice, sharp but witty. Meanwhile, Grandma still handles life better than her grown kids. Selfish and proud. It wasn't cruel. It was truth, beautifully packaged for the internet. I uploaded the montage. Within hours, the post blew up. Thousands of likes, shares, and comments. Friends tagging each other, strangers posting, "This is exactly how my kids are." Even local news picked up the story. Grandma's viral expose shows selfish side of adult children. The comments were merciless, but fair. The world was finally seeing the truth I'd been shouting in silence for decades. By the evening, both children had confronted me simultaneously. The panic in the room was palpable. Isabella crying, "Mom, please, people are laughing at us." Javier fuming, "Delete it. This is insane." I sipped my coffee calmly, letting them stew in their guilt. My voice was even, soft, almost maternal. You finally understand what it's like to be invisible, to be ignored, to be forgotten. Funny how life works, isn't it? As they left, desperate and defeated, I realized something. The world had now judged them publicly, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Little did they know, the final wave of viral exposure was still coming, and it would leave them speechless. The next morning, I knew they couldn't ignore it any longer. Both Isabella and Javier arrived at my apartment almost at the same time, their faces pale, voices shaky, and eyes darting as if the world itself was watching. This wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was panic, and I could savor it quietly. Isabella started first. "Mom, please, delete the posts. Everyone is talking about us, even my coworkers." Javier jumped in. "This is insane. You're humiliating us." I calmly poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. Humiliating? Oh, mijo, I'm just showing the world what I've been living with for decades. Funny how truth looks online. They looked like deer caught in headlights. For years they had ignored my calls, my advice, my presence. Now they were tasting their own medicine. I reminded them gently, almost playfully, of the specific moments I had posted. Isabella ignoring me during her engagement week. Javier grumbling over doctor appointments while I quietly supported him. Both pretending to be busy while flaunting their vacations and luxury purchases online. Their faces drained of color. Every memory I listed matched a post, a viral clip, a public comment. They realized I had proof of every selfish act. Isabella tried crying. Javier attempted to shout, but nothing worked. I wasn't just exposing them, I was teaching them a lesson in accountability, and the world was already watching. Do you see now how it feels to be invisible? To be ignored? To be dismissed? I asked softly, savoring the silence that followed. As they left my apartment defeated, I knew one thing. The final wave of exposure, the montage showing both their selfishness in its entirety, was still coming. And this time, it wouldn't just be friends and coworkers watching. The world would see everything, and they wouldn't be able to turn back. I had waited patiently, letting the tension simmer. Isabella and Javier had begun to understand what it felt like to be ignored, invisible, and unappreciated. But this wasn't enough. I wanted the truth to be undeniable, not just to them, but to everyone who had ever doubted me, ignored me, or questioned my worth. I opened at Sasi Abuela one last time and began assembling the ultimate montage. I combined clips from every post, every anecdote, every act of selfishness I had collected over the years. But here was the twist. I interwove my sacrifices and patience, narrated in my own voice, "This is what your mother did for you while you were busy being adults. Remember this the next time you forget who made your life possible." It wasn't just exposure. It was irrefutable proof that they had taken me for granted their entire lives. I posted it. Within hours, the video went global. Thousands of shares, likes, and comments. Media outlets caught wind. Grandma goes viral exposing selfish adult children. Friends, neighbors, and strangers were tagging Isabella and Javier, demanding responses, sharing similar stories. Their carefully curated lives, once perfect in appearance, were shattered by the truth. By the evening, both children appeared at my door, speechless, ashamed, and trembling. "Mom, we didn't realize," Isabella began. Javier nodded, barely able to speak. I smiled softly, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "Now you know how it feels to be ignored and forgotten. Maybe now you'll finally appreciate the sacrifices I made for you." They had no excuses. No words could undo the public truth. As they left, heads bowed and humbled, I realized something profound. I hadn't just exposed my children, I had liberated myself. For decades, I had been invisible. Now, the world knew who I was, and I had my justice. The house was finally quiet. Isabella and Javier had retreated, humbled and speechless, while I sat in my favorite armchair, staring at my phone. The notifications never stopped. Likes, shares, comments, even messages from people I'd never met, thanking me for standing up to selfish children everywhere. And in that quiet moment, I allowed myself to reflect. For years, I had tolerated being invisible. I had smiled through neglect, forgave repeated slights, and held my tongue while my children flaunted their priorities above mine. But I realized something important. Their ignorance wasn't harmless. It was a daily erasure of my life, my sacrifices, and my worth. The social media expose wasn't just revenge, it was justice in its purest form. I wasn't cruel, I was giving them a mirror, forcing them to see themselves, and I, at last, had control over my narrative. Through the process, I gained more than viral fame or temporary satisfaction. I gained validation, proof that my sacrifices mattered, empowerment, a voice that could no longer be ignored, closure. Finally, the children understood the consequences of their selfishness, and best of all, I did it on my own terms, using humor, wit, and undeniable truth. I thought about the comments, strangers sharing stories of their own selfish kids, messages of solidarity, even laughter at the cleverness of my plan. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, appreciated, and free. I had my revenge. I had my justice. and for the first time in years, I could rest knowing they would never forget the lessons I taught. I smiled, scrolling through the countless notifications, and whispered to myself, sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's truth, and sometimes the truth goes viral. With that, I set the phone aside, leaned back, and allowed myself to enjoy the peace I had earned.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one on the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.